The last time we flew in virtual reality in the Philadelphia area, we got a little bit lost. This time, we'll have a little bit of help with the use of VORs to assist us in navigation. Will we get lost again? Find out in this 36 nautical mile flight from Brandywine to Doylestown in the Cessna 152 in VR. Let's hop into the pilot seat and get started. Alright, we're in the Cessna 152. We'll open up the default checklist, which works beautifully in VR. Unfortunately, it's pretty sparse, but we'll use what we have. So we'll start by getting the fuel shutoff valve turned on. That's here between the seats on the floor. It's a little hard to grab with the VR controller. Our parking brake is set. Our feet are on the brakes. We'll go to the next page. We'll get the mixture to full rich. We'll check that the carb heat is cold. It's right there by the throttle. That looks good. We'll prime it. So normally there's a little chart based on the outside temperature. We'll pull it 4 times. Next we'll crack the throttle, 1/2 inch. We'll go down and get the master on. That looks good. Now it says ignition start, but I'm going to turn on the beacon first, and we'll yell clear prop. And I don't know why I periodically get these bandwidth errors, but it seems to be working okay. So clear that. Now we'll head down to the starter here. Click that over to start, and we have ignition. Alright. So we'll get the RPM down to 1000 RPM. That looks good. Our oil pressure is not quite in the green. That should come up as it warms up a bit. Or maybe I'm thinking of oil temperature. And we'll turn the nav lights on. I think you only need them on if it's dark out, but we'll get them on anyway. So we'll move to the next page and close that. Pull up FS kneeboard. I talked about this plugin in the last video. So this has both a moving map and your own charts that you can put into its folder. So I have the VFR sectionals that we'll be using. Now to make the VFR sectionals readable, I find that I need to resize the FS kneeboard window. And it's a little tricky to grab onto it. There we go. We'll go over to the charts section. And it takes it actually like 20 seconds or so to do the resizing. So while we do that, we'll get the transponder into standby. And we'll also dial COM2 to guard frequency, which is 121.5. And I notice on the C152, the VR controllers work exactly how you expect for the dials. So I can click on the dial and just twist my wrist to tune it. I complained in the last flight that Just Flight's Piper Warrior was really hard to do this, and I realized it must be how they set up the control interface for each individual aircraft. This one works great. Alright, we'll scroll down here and find Brandywine. So Brandywine is an untowered field. We'll dial in the CTAF frequency, so you can see that was right on the sectional chart. One, 2, 3, 095 or 075. Then we'll hit the swap and make that the primary frequency. Now in standby, we'll get the CTAF for our destination, which is Doylestown. So this way that will all be set up. And when we get in range and want to make our call, we can just toggle over to standby. And that will take care of COM1, COM2, and standby. And we're going to use some VORs to help us out for this flight, since the last time we got a little bit lost in the Brandywine area. Just southwest of us is Modena VOR. So we're going to depart flying west and then fly up towards the Schuylkill River. We're looking for a couple visual landmarks here, including the bend in the river and Pickering Reservoir, and then we're going to turn and fly towards Horsham Valley Airport. Horsham Valley Airport is a closed field. It runs right alongside of 611, so we're going to follow 611 right to Doylestown. So we've got a couple headings to fly. To help us with this, we're going to dial in Modena VOR, which is right down here. So that's our frequency for Modena. We'll head over here to nav 1 and dial it in. Toggle that over. Now you see we're not picking it up yet because we're on the ground, so we'll have to wait till we're in the air to verify it using a little Morse code. And the heading we want to fly is the 040 radial from Modena. You can see the compass rose here. We'll count out to about where we want. So now we're going to go over to our course deviation indicator. Click on the OBS, which is our Omni Bearing Selector, and dial in our desired heading. Now we've also got a VOR up here by Doylestown. So we're going to dial its frequency into nav 2 and do the same thing. We're going to pick the heading that connects that VOR with Doylestown Field. There it is. And then we're going to go over to CDI 2 and dial in that heading. Now we're not actually planning on flying that heading. If I have trouble finding the field, then I can use this as a visual indicator of whether I am before or after that radial that connects the field to the VOR. Now we've also got a non-directional beacon from Wings Field. That's Ambler in dB, so we're going to dial that in. And that'll be real useful, letting us know when we are approaching Wings Field and passing Wings Field. We'll be flying north of it as we head towards Horsham Valley, but we don't have a DME on this aircraft, so this would be a nice supplemental way to know if we're before or after the field based on which way the ADF is pointing. The ADF is the yellow arrow that's above our controls here. It has sort of an orange stick figure of an airplane and a horizontal yellow line pointing to the right. That's the ADF. Alright, other than that, our airspace for the Philly Bravo starts at 3,000 for this ring, so we'll want to make sure that we don't climb above that, so we're going to fly at 2,200 for this flight. Alright, we'll close the toolbar there. Everything's already set up here. Normally we'd get the weather, dial in the altimeter, calibrate our directional gyro to the whiskey compass, but that is all set up already, so we can skip those steps. Brandywine traffic, Cessna 359 Golf Charlie, taxi runway 27 Brandywine. Unfortunately, we can't get either of these guys to move out of the way, so we're just going to pretend that I didn't just bonk him in the head with my left wing. Keep on going. So that was our first CTAF call. This is an untowered field, so we'll make CTAF calls to let people know what we're doing. Technically, you are not required to make CTAF calls, but it's a good idea. So we're announcing that we're taxiing. Anybody who's flying in the air, approaching the field, is now going to know that we are taxiing and getting ready to depart the field. So they'll keep an eye out for us. We'll keep an eye out for them. Unfortunately, the checklist doesn't have run-up built into it, and I'm just going to skip it. I think if I get motivated, I might make a custom checklist for the Cessna 152. So instead, while we're sitting here at the hold short line, we'll get the transponder to mode C. We'll get our flaps set to 1. We'll go down here and make sure that our strobes, landing light, and pitot heat are turned on. And I never turned on my alternator. That's not on the checklist. That's not a good excuse, but it would help if the checklist told me to turn on the alternator. I don't think there's an alternator indicator light on the C152 either. Good thing I got that. Alright, we are clear on final. Brandywine traffic, Cessna 359 Golf Charlie, departing runway 27, straight out departure, climbing 2,200 Brandywine. 2 years ago, I did the Oshkosh virtual event with Pilot Edge, and I was flying a Cessna, I think it was a 150 in the virtual event. So I went there, and then I did a separate video where I departed from Oshkosh, which just is an awesome experience if you're a Pilot Edge member, because they have the actual real-life air traffic controllers for Oshkosh managing the whole event. So you've got multiple controllers and tons of traffic, and you know, you're rocking your wings, you're doing all the stuff that you would do for Oshkosh. So I remember trying to get out of Oshkosh. There was just a nose-to-tail line of traffic, and they were departing us with us lining up side by side on the same runway and staggering our takeoffs. So you had all this stuff going on, and I was just trying to process all of it. I took off, I got out of Oshkosh, and I headed on my way to my destination airport. And about 2/3 of the way along the flight, all of the power turned off on the aircraft. So just everything electrical turned off, and I was just scratching my head trying to figure out what happened. So I quickly started troubleshooting it and realized I'd never turned on the alternator. So I'd been running off battery for the entire flight, and it was similar. I'd never turned on the alternator because I had a million things going on, and I was distracted, and I was rushing through my checklists. So I turned the alternator back on, and all the power came back on, and life was good, and I landed normally. Alright, so we are flying runway heading here, and we're about to make our first turn. So our initial turn is going to be towards heading 040. But really, once we make that turn, we're going to look at our course deviation indicator and try to intercept the 040 radial from Medina. If you look at our course deviation indicator, which is the top gauge to the left of the comm stack, you can see that there's a green nav light on it. Both CDI-1 and CDI-2 both have their nav lights on, so they are receiving. You can see that there is a vertical arrow on it that's all the way to the right. So that means currently we are left of the radial. If we wanted to, we could count how many tick marks we are left of that line, and that would tell us how many degrees left of the radial we are. So here we are at 040, rolling out. We're minding our altitude. We're at about quarter to 2. We're about 2,800 is what I wanted to say. I'm reading it like a clock. I'm sorry, 1,800. We're at 1,800, approaching 2,000. Now I would like to pick up 202 and follow it north. I'm not seeing it here, but that's why we've got our VOR. So now I'm going to turn east and fly east until we intercept our VOR. There we go, so we're rolling out, flying roughly heading 090. You could see the vertical line on the CDI is now starting to move towards the center. So we are approaching from the left of it, flying east, and we're going to intercept it shortly. It's getting close. And now we're going to start to turn back to heading 040. And then roll out onto our 040 heading. You can see I turned a little bit late, so we overshot the radial slightly. So I'm going to jog back over a little bit and try to center that up. We're flying VFR for this, so this is just an aid for us. We don't need to precisely fly the radial, but we've got it centered up. Alright, so our goal is to hold this heading. We're at just a hair above our target altitude, our cruising altitude of 2200. Going to fly heading 040, and we're going to follow the Medina 040 radial from. Now right off to my left here, I found Route 202 and Route 30, which is what I was visually looking for before, but I knew if I just flew this radial, I would end up where I want to be. So cool, we're already doing 100% better than we did on our last flight when we got lost trying to find the airport. So remember, we are flying underneath the Philly Bravo. To our east, we've got a 2000 shelf, so we don't want to stray off of this radial. Now I've got another visual landmark. I saw this flying the first time to Brandywine, that blue stadium down there. And that is Great Valley Stadium. It's a school. You can see a bunch of baseball fields around there too. So these are the type of landmarks I look for when I'm doing visual flying. Stadiums in particular are really easy to spot. Schools are easy to spot. They usually have a bunch of athletic fields around them. Major roads are easy to spot. So that's good. This is all lining up with my mental image of what I should be finding. Off to my right here is Route 202 and 29. On my last video when I flew to Brandywine, we were following 29 until it intercepted 202, and we wanted to follow 202. I missed that intersection in the last video, and that's how I got lost. Off my nose there, you can see some water. It's sort of an S shape. That's the Schulykill River. So we are heading north, kind of a northeast. Off to my left here is a quarry. That's DeVault Quarry. There's a symbol on the VFR chart which shows a pickaxe and a hammer crisscrossed, which I think is the symbol for a mine or a quarry, and I think that's the default quarry that we just overflew. Now I'm looking around for Pickering Reservoir, and I don't see it, so I'm just going to ignore that. As long as we stay on our radial. we are doing well.
79 Tango Fox, normal speed, higher than 2 miles.
Off to the left there, I don't know if you spotted it, but you could see the cooling towers from Limerick Nuclear Power Station. In my first VR video, we flew there. There they are, see them? You can see the steam plumes coming off of them. Now on your screen, they're really tiny dots, but in virtual reality, everything is life-sized, so even though they're small on your screen, for me, they look like 500-foot tall columns. There's another stadium that's Washington Field. And there's the cooling towers again, right off my strut that I mentioned.
Piedmont 6001, just descend to 5,000 and reduce speed to 190.
There's the Schulykill.
5 on Golf Julie radar contact. I'm maintaining 900,000 direct tone.
Alright, we're getting close.
5 on Golf Julie radar contact. I'm maintaining 900,000.
So we're going to wait until we get completely on the north side of the Schulykill River, and then we're going to turn and fly heading 080.
9 Tango Fox, I'm maintaining 12000. 9 Tango Fox, contact departure 11975.
Now the next part of the flight is actually a little easier. I've flown around this area in the sim so much that I'm pretty familiar with how things look and where I am underneath the Bravo based on how the Schuylkill River is turning or how 76 looks. So making our turn here. We've got some clouds today. They're around 4,000 feet. The requirements depend on the airspace you're flying, so here's the Ben Franklin Highway off to our left. It's a very distinct spot where it splits and then re-merges. So I was talking about the clearance from clouds. So for the type of airspace that we are flying in now, which is Class E, there's a good way to remember this. It's 3 Cessna 152s, which is strangely appropriate because we're flying a C152. So we need 3 statute miles visibility, which we have today. And then we need to 152 remain 1,000 feet above a cloud, 500 feet below a cloud, or 2,000 feet laterally away from a cloud. Off to our left here we have Arcola Intermediate School, another easy visual waypoint. It's got some baseball fields around it. I like to look for schools because they look where I'm at. So I was talking about the cloud clearance. You notice that there's more clearance requirement above than below. That's to protect for jets, which typically are going much faster when they are coming out of an airport and popping up through clouds than they are when they're descending into an airport. I've been wondering how to gauge 2,000 lateral feet in the simulator versus a cloud, but I realized that 2,000 lateral feet is around roughly half a mile. And when you are flying the pattern, you're about half a mile to 1 mile. So my mental rule of thumb is treat it like I'm flying the pattern, so stay that distance away from the cloud. Alright, we found 476 off our left wing, which means that we are near Wings Field. And it's really hard to see, but it's where my strut is. It's halfway down the center of my strut there. It's that kind of vertical, clear area in the trees. Now if you look at the ADF, and I'll point this out again, on the right-hand side of the console, it's pointing almost due east, because it is dialed into the directional beacon. There it is. It's dialed into the non-directional beacon that's near Wings Field. So that's yet another confirmation that that is really Wings Field that I'm looking at, because that's where Wings Field directional beacon is. Non-directional beacon, I keep calling it a directional beacon. Got another golf course there. Alright, we're doing great, so we've just got to hold this heading until we get Horsham Field into view, and that will be really easy to spot. So I'm going to toggle over to my standby frequency, which is the Doylestown CTAF frequency. So when we are 10 miles out from Doylestown, we'll make our call.
Rapid turn right heading 240, clear visual flight 27.
When I have Horsham Field in sight, we'll be around 10 miles from Doylestown. So that's the point where I'll make my CTAF call. The point of the CTAF call is to let people know you're coming, so they'll know which direction you're coming from, what altitude, and what you intend to do. So being that we've passed 476 and Wings Field, the next visual waypoint will be Route 309. So I'm looking all around here trying to find it. I can see two roads coming from my right here, and that's it. That's 309. So now we're passing 309. That means Horsham Valley will be the next waypoint. And there it is. So this airport is closed. You can see yellow X's on the runway. Now we could use it in an emergency if we needed to, but otherwise it's a closed field. And just to the right of it is 611. That's that road running parallel. Make our CTAF call as we're doing our turn. Doylestown traffic, Cessna 359 Golf Charlie, 10 miles south at 2,200. We'll be entering the left downwind for runway 23 for a full stop at Doylestown. So when I'm flying a high-wing aircraft like the Cessna, I'm so used to using the strut as sort of a ruler to line up the field, where you try to get the field halfway up the strut, which gives you the proper spacing for the downwind, that whenever I follow a road, I like to do the same thing. So I'll try to line up the road halfway up the strut. It's actually a little hard to follow the road if you fly directly over it, because you're trying to look over your nose at it. I find it's much easier to look over your shoulder at the strut and follow it. So we'll open up FS leadboard and take a look at our sectional again. I'm going to check traffic pattern altitude. I've already got the CTAF dialed in. So the field elevation is written here, and traffic pattern altitude will default to 1,000 feet above it, unless explicitly stated. So now I know what altitude we need to arrive at. That's Warrington that we're passing over. As I mentioned in my other videos, I just love flying around this area because the photogrammetry is so good that you can pick out specific buildings. So you can pick out, you know, an Applebee's, things like that, and use them as a reference. There's Tamaman Middle School. There's some distinctive buildings in the upper right there. That's Buck County Jail. Sort of these snowflake-shaped buildings near the right of the strut. And up ahead I can see where 611 is going to make its turn, so we don't want to follow that turn, but instead we want to continue going straight and follow the smaller road that branches off of it.
So 75 Delta Fox, William approach, Philly altimeter 3029. What approach we on?
So while we're doing this, be sure guys to leave me some comments. It's hard to gauge whether you like the virtual reality videos that I've been doing lately. They're different than my montage videos. So if you've watched my channel, you know I usually have very short videos, about 6 minutes, that'll have 2 minutes of flight prep, 2 minutes of flight, 2 minutes of debrief. And the flight itself is usually a musical montage with a bunch of exterior shots from the aircraft. Lately, I've been doing virtual reality, and I've been doing almost the entire flight. You know, this is a 36-mile flight, so in real life it would be about a 20-minute flight, so you've got almost the entire flight here in VR, but it's different than my, bite-sized montages that you normally get. So let me know if you like that. If you don't like that, if you just want the montages, speak up, and I'll do that. But if you want more VR, let me know, and I'll do that as well. Alright, we've got the field in sight. So I'm going to turn now so that we approach the downwind on a 45-degree angle. Our traffic pattern altitude is 1347, and we are right there. Perfect. We're approaching on a 45 so that we have a really good visibility of the pattern and anybody that's in it. And now we're going to roll out and try to line up the runway so that it's halfway down the strut. Pretty good. We're about 2/3 of the way, so we're a little bit far out from the field. Drop our first notch of flaps because we are abeam the numbers on the runway. And now as we're flying here, we want to wait until the field is 45 degrees over our left shoulder. We're flying the left downwind here, by the way. I forgot to mention that. Whoa! And the world winked out of existence. That happened in my last video too. Might be related to that error that I dismissed at the beginning of this video for insufficient bandwidth. So we're turning off of our downwind onto our base leg. You know, when you fly the pattern, you're flying a big rectangle. The downwind is parallel to the runway, the base is perpendicular. So we're going to work on descending. And flying downhill, and I'm actually not doing a great job of it here. Our descent rate's a little too slow, but I'm still trying to gauge how far I am from the threshold based on where I turned. I've already pre-picked out this patch of water off my nose here as a potential turning spot for final. I spied that as we were on the downwind. We're going to turn right before that. What's great about VR is I can tilt my head left here and peek around the nose to see where I'm turning. I'm going to try to roll out on the extended center line of the runway, and I can see that I'm higher than I wanted to be, so as I was worried about, I didn't quite drop enough altitude. I should probably go around, but I'm going to try to salvage it here. Now, if you've flown in Flight Simulator, you'll know that if you just dive bomb the runway, you're going to pick up speed, and you're still not going to be able to land, right? Because you have to then decrease your speed enough to touch down. You can do something called a slip, which is where you negate your turn with your rudder, and that'll let you drop down without picking up speed. We're not doing that here. I'm just trying to manage this with power. And although I brought myself in pretty low, right about here, I was a little worried about coming up short, so I brought power back in. You could see the nose balloon back up a little bit, and I think that was an error, so now I'm floating. Trying to get back on center line, and bit off center line. and plus we fishtailed a little bit there, just a little bit. So that was not a great landing. My last two videos, it went much better. As we roll out here, we'll get our flaps up, try to get ourselves back towards the center of the runway. And we're going to go all the way to the end here and then hang a right onto the taxiway. So we need to be completely clear of the runway before announcing all clear. I'm going to wait till we're past the hold short line. And we are clear. Doylestown traffic, Cessna 359 Golf Charlie, clear, runway 23, Doylestown. This is a freeware version of Doylestown that I got from flightsim.to. There are actually two versions on flightsim.to. One of them has Doylestown actually written on the taxiway, like the real airport does, which I like. This one doesn't have the lettering, but I think the buildings are better, and so are all the atmospheric objects. You know, like people and things like that that are scattered around the runway. So I'll put the link in the video description so that you can enjoy it. Alright, I can see that we've got some tugger drivers waiting for me already. I'm not going to park next to them, much to their dismay. Instead, I'll go park down here where the other aircraft are. I think this freeware version looks great. The hangars look awesome. They've got fence, they've got tarps, cones, all sorts of objects. A lot of flavor. I like it. Alright, we made it. So we'll get everything shut down here in our C152. Get our transponder off. I should really do that after I'm clear of the runway. Start turning off our lights. In my last video, I said that Microsoft Flight Simulator wouldn't let you leave the aircraft via teleportation in VR, but it can prevent you from physically standing up and walking outside of it, so that's what I did. And I'm actually amazed at how small this aircraft is. I mean, the wings are like neck height on me, and to get out of it, I needed to bend over completely at the waist. So I wonder if that's accurate, if it's really that small in real life. So I hope you enjoyed this flight. If you enjoy content like this, be sure to click that like button, leave me a comment, and don't forget to subscribe. It really helps the channel if you can leave a like or a comment, because the YouTube algorithm needs that. So thanks as always for flying along with me, and stay tuned for further flight adventures.